Ladies and gentlemen, life is a series of tests and trials. The path to maturity, both as an individual and as a society, is not paved with comfort but with hardship. It is in those moments of suffering that our true nature is revealed. But here's a profound truth that may give you peace. What they did to you will haunt them more than it ever hurt you. This is not merely a comforting platitude, it's a deep psychological reality that lies at the heart of human nature and moral consequence. Resilience is not merely about surviving hardship. It's about how we respond to it, how we grow through it, and how we allow it to shape us into stronger individuals. When we think of resilience, we often imagine bouncing back from adversity, rebuilding after a setback, recovering from trauma, or finding our way again after a devastating blow. But this view can oversimplify resilience, reducing it to something reactive. True resilience goes beyond simply getting back to normal. It involves transforming oneself in the process, evolving into a more capable and robust version of who we were before the challenge. There's a profound power in the way we respond to suffering. Adversity, as painful and devastating as it can be, offers an opportunity that is seldom recognized in the moment, the chance for growth and transformation. When someone does harm to us, whether through betrayal, injustice, or simply malicious intent, they may expect that we will be reduced to a broken, powerless state. Their goal might be to diminish us, to create a version of ourselves that is smaller, weaker, and easier to manipulate or control. What they fail to understand is that suffering is an alchemical process. Yes, it hurts, it wounds us, sometimes deeply, but it can also forge something within us that is far more powerful than we might have thought possible. The act of enduring hardship and rising above it is not simply a matter of resisting damage. It's about transmuting that pain into something that enhances who we are. It's a process of forging strength, courage, and wisdom. When you endure suffering, you are undergoing a process that builds your inner fortitude. It forces you to look at the world differently, to confront the truth of your vulnerability. Through this process, you begin to develop a deeper understanding of yourself, your values, and your purpose. You find strength in places you never thought possible. In this sense, adversity serves as the catalyst for your personal development. One of the greatest aspects of resilience is the ability to find meaning within suffering. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote about this in his seminal work, Man's Search for Meaning. He argues that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond to it. Frankl's experiences in the concentration camps taught him that even in the most unimaginable circumstances, people could find meaning in their suffering. This is the essence of true resilience. It is not the absence of pain or difficulty, but the capacity to endure and even grow through it. When you find meaning in your suffering, it stops being something that defines you in a negative way. Instead, it becomes a stepping stone, a tool for your growth and development. Moreover, resilience is not something we're born with, but rather something we cultivate over time. It is built through experience, through facing challenges and learning how to cope with them. When we are confronted with difficulty, we are given a choice: to be defeated by it or to learn from it and rise stronger. Each time we face hardship and choose to endure, we are expanding our capacity for resilience. With each challenge, we become more aware of our inner strength and more confident in our ability to handle what comes next. But it's important to note that resilience does not mean simply getting over our pain and moving on. True resilience involves processing our pain, acknowledging it, and understanding it. We don't simply bury our emotions or ignore the trauma we've faced. Instead, we confront it, allow ourselves to grieve, and then make a conscious decision to move forward, not in spite of our pain, but because of it. When we choose to face our suffering head on, it no longer has the power to control us. Instead, it becomes part of the narrative of our lives, an experience that has shaped us, but one that does not have to define us. Furthermore, resilience is not just about surviving the storm, it's about thriving in spite of it. People often think of resilient individuals as those who simply endure. But there's a deeper layer to resilience that involves using challenges to propel us forward, to transform us into something more powerful. A person who has faced a difficult past and rises above it is not just someone who survives. They are someone who has the capacity to innovate, to lead, to teach others how to find meaning and strength in their own suffering. What's important to recognize is that the resilience we build through adversity is not just a personal victory. It's a gift we can offer to others as well. When we rise above the challenges in our lives, we not only help ourselves, we inspire those around us. Our strength becomes a beacon for others who are struggling with their own battles. By showing them that it is possible to endure, grow, and emerge stronger, we give them the hope that they too can rise above their difficulties. In the end, resilience is not something that is given to us. It is something we develop through our actions, through the choices we make in the face of adversity. It is the act of consciously deciding not to allow life's difficulties to break us, but instead to use them as tools for growth. The power of resilience lies in the knowledge that no matter how painful or difficult our experiences may be, we have the ability to rise above them and to emerge stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. This is the true power of resilience. It is not just about surviving the storm, but about learning how to dance in the rain, to find joy in the struggle, and to come out on the other side transformed. When we talk about the consequences of harmful actions, it's essential to recognize that the harm caused by one person does not merely affect the individual targeted, it has broader, often more profound consequences for the one who initiates the harm. This is something many people fail to fully grasp when they are motivated by anger, revenge, or a desire to control or manipulate others. The truth is, the one who harms another often believes they are simply taking what they are owed or asserting dominance. But the reality is far more complex. The individual who seeks to hurt others, whether intentionally or through neglect, is inflicting damage not just on their victim, but also on themselves, often in ways that are far more profound than they realize. To begin with, every action we take is a reflection of our inner world. If we choose to harm another, whether physically, emotionally, or psychologically, we are revealing something about the state of our own mind and heart. It's important to understand that the person who engages in harmful actions is not simply damaging the other person. They are, in fact, distorting their own moral compass. When we act in ways that betray our values, when we hurt someone without justification, we begin to erode the very integrity that holds us together as human beings. The person who harms another does not walk away from the act unchanged. They carry with them the consequences of their own actions. Think about it. If someone lies, betrays trust, or causes another person suffering for their own benefit, what does that say about their own character? They are demonstrating that they do not have the strength or the moral clarity to resolve conflict in a healthy way. Instead, they choose the path of deceit or cruelty, which over time can erode their sense of self-worth. The more a person engages in harmful behavior, the more they risk losing touch with their own humanity. And this internal decay is far more damaging in the long run than any temporary gain they may achieve from their actions. This internal moral erosion creates a profound conflict within them, and it becomes increasingly difficult to escape the consequences of their own choices. Moreover, the damage caused by harmful actions is not always immediately apparent. The consequences of a harmful deed may not be evident in the moment. The person who harms may feel vindicated in the short term, believing that they've won or that they've achieved some form of victory. But the true cost of their actions often becomes clearer with time. Harmful actions are like stones thrown into a pond. They create ripples that extend far beyond the immediate impact. Even if the person who caused harm never experiences direct retaliation, they are still confronted with the consequences of their behavior, which often manifest in more subtle and insidious ways. For example, if a person betrays the trust of a close friend, they may think that the betrayal is a one-time event that won't affect their life in the long term. However, this breach of trust often leads to a breakdown in future relationships. The person who betrays another finds that they are unable to form deep connections with others because their behavior has compromised their integrity. They may feel isolated, unable to trust others, and unable to trust themselves. Over time, this loss of connection creates a psychological toll that is far more damaging than the satisfaction of the short-term victory they might have felt at the time of the betrayal. The impact of harmful actions also extends to a person's overall sense of peace and well-being. When someone harms another, especially when they do so repeatedly, they create an internal conflict within themselves that often leads to stress, anxiety, and a loss of inner harmony. The act of harming others, particularly when it is premeditated or done out of malice, creates a psychological burden. It is difficult to live peacefully knowing that you've inflicted pain on others, especially if you are aware that your actions were unjustified. This internal conflict, the dissonance between what one does and what one knows to be right, creates a profound sense of unease that cannot be easily escaped. Furthermore, harmful actions have a tendency to erode a person's ability to trust themselves. A person who continually harms others begins to doubt their own judgment and their ability to make good decisions. Over time, they may begin to feel that they are fundamentally flawed or that they are incapable of choosing the right path. This erosion of self-trust is incredibly damaging because it undermines a person's confidence and their sense of agency. A person who has engaged in harmful behavior begins to question their ability to make ethical decisions, and this doubt can lead to further mistakes and even more harm. In addition to the psychological consequences, harmful actions often come with social repercussions. People are not isolated beings. We live in a web of relationships, and our actions have consequences for those around us. When someone harms another person, they often find that their social circle begins to shrink. People begin to avoid them, not because they don't understand or forgive, but because they no longer trust them. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and when that trust is broken, it's difficult to repair. The person who harms another often finds themselves isolated, alienated, and left to contend with the fallout of their actions alone. Lastly, harmful actions can destroy a person's reputation in ways that cannot be easily mended. It's easy to think that if you get away with something, there are no consequences, but even if others are unaware of the wrong you've done, you are always left with the knowledge of your own actions. And that knowledge shapes your behavior and how you interact with the world. The longer someone engages in harmful behavior, the more it becomes part of their identity. They begin to see themselves as someone who is capable of hurting others, and that self-perception becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Over time, this diminishes their ability to be trusted by others and undermines their sense of worth. In conclusion, the person who harms another often fails to realize that they are doing more damage to themselves than to the person they are hurting. The harm they inflict may seem to offer them some temporary satisfaction or gain, but in the long run, the internal and external consequences of their actions are far more profound. Their moral decay, the loss of self-trust, the erosion of their relationships, and the isolation they create for themselves are all far greater burdens than anything their victim could ever endure. This is why harm, whether physical, emotional, or psychological, does not just affect the one who is wronged, it ultimately destroys the person who perpetrates it. The more they choose to inflict suffering on others, the more they risk losing their own peace, their own sense of integrity, and their ability to lead a fulfilling life. The concept of the long-term impact of our choices is crucial to understanding the depth of how our actions ripple through time, affecting not just the present moment, but also the future in ways we may not immediately perceive. Too often, people focus on the immediate outcomes of their decisions, thinking only in terms of short-term results. When we face challenges or decide to harm others, it's easy to become fixated on what we can gain right now, whether that's a sense of control, relief from anger, or the satisfaction of winning a momentary victory. However, this mindset overlooks a fundamental truth. The consequences of our actions are never truly confined to the moment in which they occur. Every choice we make sets off a chain of events that can alter the course of our lives and the lives of others for years to come. This is especially evident in moments of conflict, betrayal, or cruelty. At the time, it may seem as though the harm you inflict on another person will not have lasting effects. Perhaps you feel justified in your actions or believe that the pain you cause is temporary. Yet the reality is that the damage done can leave a mark on both the person who is harmed and the person who causes harm. The full weight of these actions often becomes clear only over time. In the immediate aftermath, one might not fully comprehend the deep emotional or psychological toll inflicted on the other person. That betrayal or insult may seem like a fleeting moment of satisfaction, but the scars it leaves often linger far longer. For the person who is wronged, the impact may be profound and enduring, influencing their relationships, their trust in others, and their ability to move forward in life. But the impact on the person who caused harm can be just as, if not more, significant. In the long run, the person who commits harm may come to realize that their actions have led to a fundamental shift in how they view themselves. At first, they may feel empowered or vindicated by their choices, but as time passes, they will likely confront the internal consequences of their actions. The most immediate consequence is the erosion of their own moral integrity. A person who engages in harmful behavior, especially when it is done without remorse, begins to chip away at their sense of right and wrong. This internal decay is not something that can be ignored or easily overlooked. Over time, this eroding sense of self takes a toll on their confidence, their emotional well-being, and their ability to connect with others in meaningful ways. The act of harming another person, particularly when done out of anger or resentment, creates an internal conflict within the perpetrator. This conflict arises because at a deeper level, they recognize that they are betraying a core moral principle, that of treating others with respect and empathy. While they may justify their actions in the moment, the longer they continue to harm others, the more this inner conflict intensifies. The longer they avoid confronting the truth of their actions, the more it will eat away at their peace of mind, slowly consuming their sense of self-worth. They may find themselves trapped in a cycle of guilt, shame, or regret, struggling to reconcile their behavior with the person they wish to be. Moreover, the long-term consequences of our choices extend beyond the individual level and affect our relationships with others. Each time we choose to harm someone, whether through betrayal, cruelty, or neglect, we are planting seeds of distrust and disconnection. In the short term, we may convince ourselves that we can maintain our relationships despite our actions, but in the long run, the damage becomes harder to repair. Relationships are built on trust, and once trust is broken, it is incredibly difficult to rebuild. People may begin to avoid the person who has caused harm, not out of anger, but because they no longer feel safe or secure in their presence. The emotional toll of broken relationships can last for years, leaving both parties with unresolved pain, bitterness, and regret. For the person who has caused harm, the consequences of their actions may compound over time. As they continue to engage in behavior that hurts others, they may find themselves increasingly isolated. They may lose friends, family, or colleagues who can no longer tolerate their behavior. This social isolation can lead to feelings of loneliness and despair, making it even harder to break free from the patterns of harmful behavior. They may also experience a deepening sense of self-doubt as their ability to form healthy, trusting relationships becomes increasingly compromised. This cycle of damage and isolation is difficult to break as it often becomes self-perpetuating. The more harm someone causes, the more alienated they become from others, and the more alienated they feel, the more they may continue to act in ways that cause further harm. Even when the harm caused is not immediately visible to others, it has a long-lasting impact on the person's life. The internal consequences of guilt and shame can manifest in subtle but powerful ways. These feelings may affect a person's mental health, leading to anxiety, depression, or a general sense of unrest. They may begin to feel disconnected from themselves, unsure of who they are or what they stand for. This internal dissonance can become so overwhelming that it begins to affect their overall well-being, undermining their ability to function effectively in their personal and professional lives. The long-term impact of their actions is not just a matter of social consequences. It is also an emotional and psychological burden that they carry with them, often without even realizing the depth of its effect. Finally, the long-term consequences of harmful actions are also tied to the way they influence our future decisions. When we engage in behavior that causes harm, we often convince ourselves that it was justified or necessary. However, each time we make a harmful choice, it becomes easier to make that choice again in the future. We begin to rationalize our actions, creating patterns of behavior that become ingrained over time. These patterns not only shape how we interact with others, but also how we view ourselves. The longer someone engages in harmful behavior, the more it becomes part of their identity. They may start to see themselves as someone who is capable of hurting others, and that self-perception becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. This can make it harder to change, as the behavior becomes not just a series of actions, but a defining feature of who they believe themselves to be. In conclusion, the long-term impact of our choices extends far beyond the immediate consequences we might see in the moment. Every action we take, especially those that cause harm, sets off a series of events that can alter the course of our lives in ways we may not initially recognize. The consequences of our behavior, both positive and negative, compound over time, shaping not just our relationships with others, but our sense of self and our emotional well-being. It is crucial to understand that the choices we make today will echo throughout our lives, influencing who we become and how we experience the world around us. When we discuss the idea that harmful actions can erode a person's sense of self-worth, it's essential to understand how deeply intertwined our behavior and our self-esteem are. Every action we take reflects not just our immediate intentions, but also our sense of who we are and what we stand for. This is why harmful actions, especially those motivated by malice, resentment, or selfishness, can have such devastating consequences on a person's overall sense of worth. When we harm others, even if we justify it at the time, we are not just inflicting damage on them, we are undermining the foundation of our own identity. This is a crucial aspect of understanding the long-term impact of harmful behavior, because the erosion of self-worth is not something that can be easily repaired. At the heart of our identity lies a set of core values and beliefs that guide our actions, decisions, and relationships. When we act in ways that violate these values, especially in ways that cause harm to others, we create a sense of internal conflict. This conflict arises because our actions no longer align with the person we believe ourselves to be. If we see ourselves as honest, kind, or fair, yet engage in deception, cruelty, or betrayal, it creates a profound dissonance within us. This dissonance is difficult to ignore and can lead to feelings of guilt, shame, and self-loathing. Over time, as we continue to behave in ways that contradict our core values, we begin to lose our sense of who we are. We start to see ourselves as someone who is capable of hurting others, which directly challenges our perception of our own moral integrity. This internal conflict can be incredibly destructive. People often believe that their self-worth is based on external factors, such as their accomplishments, relationships, or the approval of others. But true self-worth is derived from a deeper, more intrinsic place. How we see ourselves when no one else is looking. When we engage in harmful actions, we begin to tarnish this inner sense of value. We might try to rationalize our behavior or ignore the emotional consequences, but deep down we know the truth. We have violated a principle that is essential to our sense of self. This violation chips away at our self-respect, leaving us feeling diminished and unworthy. And the more we act in ways that betray our values, the more this sense of diminished worth becomes entrenched. One of the most significant aspects of this erosion of self-worth is the impact it has on our ability to love and respect ourselves. Self-respect is a cornerstone of healthy self-esteem. When we respect ourselves, we hold ourselves to high moral and ethical standards. We make decisions that reflect our values and treat others with kindness and fairness. But when we engage in behavior that is harmful, we lose this respect for ourselves. Instead of looking in the mirror and seeing someone we admire and trust, we see someone who is capable of doing things they know are wrong. This loss of self-respect can create a vicious cycle. The more we harm others, the less we respect ourselves. And the less we respect ourselves, the more we feel compelled to act in ways that reinforce this negative self-image. Over time, this cycle becomes harder to break, and the damage to our sense of self-worth becomes more profound. The impact of this erosion of self-worth also extends to our relationships with others. When we hurt someone else, especially when it is done intentionally or maliciously, we often find that our relationships begin to deteriorate. Trust is the foundation of any meaningful relationship, and when we betray that trust, we create a barrier between ourselves and others. But this barrier is not just external, it is also internal. When we harm someone, we often feel a sense of shame or guilt that prevents us from connecting with others in the same way. This emotional distance is not limited to the person we've hurt. It extends to everyone around us. We may begin to feel isolated, as though we no longer deserve the love, affection, or respect of those close to us. This isolation further erodes our sense of self-worth, creating a deep sense of loneliness and disconnection. Additionally, the long-term consequences of harmful actions are felt in the way we view the world. When we harm others, we start to view the world through a lens of cynicism and distrust. We may begin to see relationships as transactional, where people are either enemies to be defeated or tools to be used. This shift in perspective not only isolates us from others, but also creates a barrier to true intimacy and connection. We become increasingly skeptical of others' intentions, believing that everyone is as capable of harm as we are. This outlook further damages our self-worth, as it reinforces the belief that we are not worthy of positive, nurturing relationships. But perhaps the most insidious impact of harmful actions on self-worth is the gradual but powerful erosion of our ability to forgive ourselves. The more we harm others, the harder it becomes to reconcile our behavior with the person we aspire to be. The weight of guilt and shame grows heavier, and this burden can make it feel almost impossible to forgive ourselves. We might try to justify our actions, telling ourselves that we were right or that the person deserved it. But deep down, we know the truth. We know that we have violated a principle that is essential to who we are. This inability to forgive ourselves creates a permanent wound in our sense of self-worth, and over time, it can become increasingly difficult to heal. In this way, harmful actions don't just affect our relationships with others, they deeply affect our relationship with ourselves. The more we harm others, the more we erode the very foundation of our self-esteem. This loss of self-worth is not something that happens overnight, but rather a gradual process that unfolds over time. And while it may be tempting to focus only on the harm we cause to others, it's crucial to recognize that the real damage is often done within ourselves. The person who harms another may walk away from the situation feeling empowered or justified, but in truth, they are the ones who will carry the weight of their actions for far longer. The erosion of self-worth is not something that can be easily fixed or ignored. It requires self-reflection, accountability, and ultimately a commitment to living in alignment with our deepest values. Only then can we begin to rebuild our sense of worth and restore the integrity that we may have lost through our harmful actions. The concept of personal integrity and its deep connection to how we experience the consequences of our actions cannot be overstated. Integrity is not just about adhering to a moral code when it's convenient or when others are watching. It is about consistently aligning our behavior with the values we claim to hold, regardless of external circumstances. Integrity is foundational to trust, both in ourselves and in others. When we compromise our integrity, especially in harmful actions towards others, the consequences extend far beyond the immediate aftermath. We fail to realize that these actions chip away at the very core of our ability to trust ourselves and live authentically. The impact of losing integrity is not simply external. It affects the internal fabric of who we are, influencing how we navigate the world and how we relate to the people around us. When we engage in actions that violate our own ethical principles, especially when we knowingly harm others, we create a fracture within ourselves. This fracture manifests in the form of cognitive dissonance, an inner conflict between our actions and our values. The longer we allow this dissonance to persist, the greater the toll it takes on our sense of integrity. We cannot live in a state of constant moral contradiction without feeling its weight. It leads to a deepening sense of unease, a feeling of disconnection from our authentic selves. Over time, this conflict makes it difficult to trust our own judgment as our behavior becomes inconsistent with the person we want to be. The more we fail to act in alignment with our moral compass, the more we lose our sense of self-trust, which in turn erodes our ability to make sound decisions. This loss of integrity affects not only our relationship with ourselves, but also our relationships with others. Trust is the foundation of all human connections, whether in personal relationships, friendships, or professional environments. When we compromise our integrity, we undermine the trust that others place in us, even if our actions are not immediately recognized or uncovered by others. We still know the truth of what we've done. The awareness that we have violated someone's trust or acted in a way that contradicts our values erodes our own sense of credibility. This feeling of being out of alignment can make it difficult to maintain meaningful relationships, as others will unconsciously pick up on the subtle signals that we are not acting in a trustworthy manner. When we harm others, we are essentially sending a message that we are unreliable, unprincipled, or manipulative, and that message reverberates beyond the immediate consequences of our actions. The impact of compromised integrity is especially profound because it often results in long-term emotional consequences that are difficult to undo. A person who harms another person might convince themselves that the action was justified or that they will face no long-term repercussions. But the emotional cost of violating one's own sense of morality lingers far longer than any temporary satisfaction or gain. In fact, the person who harms others often carries the burden of their actions long after the event itself has passed. The guilt, shame, and regret that follow the loss of integrity are not easily dismissed. They become internalized, and over time, they compound, building a weight of emotional baggage that can drag down the individual's overall sense of well-being. In many cases, the individual who compromises their integrity may find that their actions have consequences that extend far beyond the immediate circle of people affected. Harmful actions can have a ripple effect that reaches far into the future, influencing how the individual interacts with others in the long term. When we betray our principles, we often lose the capacity to fully trust or respect ourselves. This lack of self-trust can make it difficult to form healthy relationships as we begin to see the world through a lens of suspicion and cynicism. We may doubt the intentions of others, believing that they too are capable of harm. As a result, we retreat into ourselves, further isolating ourselves from the very connections that could help us heal and rebuild our sense of integrity. The erosion of integrity can also diminish a person's ability to hold themselves accountable. Accountability is an essential component of personal growth. It allows us to acknowledge our mistakes, learn from them, and make better decisions in the future. However, when we engage in harmful actions and fail to confront the reality of what we've done, we avoid the responsibility of facing our own shortcomings. This avoidance of accountability only perpetuates the cycle of harm as we fail to learn from our past mistakes and continue to make decisions that are out of alignment with our values. The longer we avoid taking responsibility for our actions, the more deeply ingrained the patterns of dishonesty, manipulation, and harm become. The impact of losing integrity is not confined to the emotional or relational spheres. It also affects a person's ability to succeed and thrive in other areas of life. Success, whether in personal endeavors or professional pursuits, is often built on a foundation of trust and authenticity. People who act with integrity are respected by others, trusted with important responsibilities, and supported by those around them. Conversely, when we compromise our integrity, we may temporarily benefit from the success we gain through harmful actions, but we quickly find that the foundation of that success is shaky. The people we harm will remember our actions, and that memory will influence how they treat us moving forward. Even if our actions are not immediately discovered or addressed, the underlying distrust that stems from a lack of integrity will hinder our ability to build sustainable success. People may give us opportunities or resources, but they will always be wary of our true intentions. This creates an environment where success is short-lived and hollow, as we cannot build meaningful, long-lasting achievements on a foundation of dishonesty or cruelty. Furthermore, compromising our integrity limits our ability to find true fulfillment in life. Fulfillment comes from living in alignment with our values, from feeling proud of who we are and the choices we make. When we act in ways that betray our moral principles, we begin to feel disconnected from the things that truly bring us meaning. We may seek external validation, success, or material wealth, but these things can never provide the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing we are living in harmony with our core beliefs. The erosion of integrity makes it difficult to feel truly fulfilled because we are no longer the people we want to be. The pursuit of external success, while momentarily gratifying, cannot replace the internal peace that comes from living a life of honesty, kindness, and self-respect. Ultimately, the consequences of compromising one's integrity are profound and far-reaching. It affects our ability to trust ourselves, our relationships with others, our sense of accountability, and our long-term success. By choosing to act in alignment with our values, we build a foundation of trust, respect, and authenticity that supports us through life's challenges. However, when we fail to uphold our integrity, we risk losing the very essence of who we are and the relationships that sustain us. Integrity is the key to lasting fulfillment, and without it, we are left to navigate a world that feels disconnected, shallow, and untrustworthy. The true cost of compromising integrity is not just the harm done to others, it is the harm done to ourselves. In conclusion, the consequences of harming others, especially when driven by malice or anger, extend far beyond the immediate moment. While it may seem that the person you hurt bears the brunt of the damage, the truth is that the harm you inflict will reverberate within you in ways that are often far more profound. When we hurt others, we undermine our own integrity, erode our self-worth, and ultimately diminish our capacity to live authentically. The emotional toll of guilt, shame, and self-doubt can build up over time, leaving us disconnected from our true selves and making it harder to form meaningful, trusting relationships. The long-term impact of these actions is a complex web of internal conflict, self-doubt, and fractured connections. It is not simply a matter of what we do to others, it is a matter of what we do to ourselves in the process. Our choices shape the kind of person we become, and when we allow ourselves to act out of spite or cruelty, we lose the very foundation that allows us to trust, respect, and ultimately love ourselves. In the end, the most significant consequences of our actions are not the short-term results, but the lasting damage to our own sense of integrity and self-worth. The person who harms others will find that the weight of their actions is often more unbearable than the pain they inflicted on their victim. The key to breaking free from this cycle is recognizing the power of personal responsibility, choosing to act in alignment with our values, and understanding that true strength comes not from dominating or harming others, but from having the courage to act with kindness, empathy, and respect. By doing so, we rebuild our integrity, restore our sense of self-worth, and ultimately create a life that is meaningful, fulfilling, and in harmony with our deepest principles.